I view the emails and the push as a product or platform in itself. We probably drive as much traffic as the website does because it's 100 million people or billion messages, right? That's a product. That's not just marketing, right? You got to treat it with some respect in order to get it to kind of like an evergreen state where we were just, sending like these digest emails. That's also a product. It's a web page, right? Like every email is a collection of data coming out of our back end that has to be formatted and turned into something. It's engineering in a lot of regards.
What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Jeff Lee, Lifecycle Marketing Tech Lead at Calm. Jeff started his career as an IT specialist at IBM. He then joined Merchant Cycle as a front-end web dev and eventually ended up managing a team of web developers. He later joined Flipboard, a popular social magazine app, where he spent 5 years embedded in email dev and marketing ops. He built and grew their email capability to sending over 400 million emails per month. And today, Jeff is Lifecycle Marketing Tech Lead at Calm, where he architected their adoption of push notifications as a channel and now sends over 300 million push notifications and 2 billion emails per year at Calm. Jeff, thanks so much for your time today. Really pumped to chat, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Census. You probably have, over 15 tools in your marketing tech stack, but how many of them have the full picture of your customer's journey? Census is the universal data layer in your stack. It unifies and cleans data from all your sources and makes it available for any app to use. Census makes it super easy to unify and standardize customer data, then enrich and enhance it, like running deduplication, cleaning, scoring, and routing workflows, and then sync and activate that data across all of your tools so you can actually do something with it. For marketers and data teams that work together to power big campaigns, it's so refreshing to work from a reliable source of truth. Don't just take my word for it though. Census is loved by awesome companies like HubSpot, Perplexity, Canva, Clay, Notion, and many more. Check them out at getcensus.com and tell them we sent you.
And by the way, I'm a daily Calm user.
That's great.
Legitimately a daily Calm user. I think I found it so great because they have such a great mixture of content. Like there's like sleep, soundscapes, meditations, and different teachers. So, just wanted to say I feel like Calm's changed my life.
Yeah,
so it's
awesome.
nice to have you on.
Who's your favorite teacher right now?
I like Jay Shetty, Chibs Okereke, I want to say his name is.
Yep.
Yeah, but one of the delights about Calm is like coming to find a new sleep story that's like kind of right along your alley. And they have like sleep stories for almost everything. It's just like boring fairy tales or like tales about being on a train, but nothing happens.
Yep.
So you just fall asleep because you're just like, nothing's happening.
As a new dad, Daryl, do you find that like you need like tools to help you fall asleep less now because you have less sleep and now you just like pass out easier?
I don't know. I feel like you and I have talked about this, but there's like sleep anxiety where you are worried the baby's going to wake up. So you have trouble sleeping. So I honestly have started to do this thing where I watch like maybe some videos that are like interesting, and then I'll switch to like a story that's semi-interesting, and then right before I go to sleep, I'll put on something about like history, like the Ice Age, and then I'll just
Hey, try the I think it's the rules of tennis. Like Calm has some random ones. It's like
rules of tennis.
Here's somebody reading the rules and regulations of something. That'll put you out like immediately.
Who would have known there would be a market for this?
Yeah.
Like
I think
someone reading the rules of tennis.
It was read by I want to say Jimmy Connors, but I know it's not like that. McEnroe, John McEnroe.
Yeah.
So he's like the most ragingest like tennis guy you ever, and he's trying to put you to sleep. It's like complete like
there's like celebrities that like I think like some A-lister celebrities too that read the stories.
I hope that no one is listening to the Humans of Martech as a way to put them to sleep, but we'll try to make this one really fun.
I'll make sure this is the first episode that we can feature on sleep.
Yeah. We need a different, like an offshoot called Humans of Martech Sleep version. All right, let's get into it. So first question, Martech has been getting seemingly more and more complicated. We have to orchestrate multi-channel marketing now with different channels. So I wanted to hear from you, like, what's been your experience? Like, how is it working with engineering teams? You've worked on both sides. Are there any like best practices to working with engineering teams? Have you gone through a journey where it was hard to work with them before and now it's much better? Could you riff on that a little bit for us, Jeff?
Sure. Yeah. So yes, it was after transitioning into the marketing side, not sitting inside of engineering. It was hard to get people's attention, right? Because they're just like, oh, we got plenty of other things to do that don't include you. So I think part of it was just, okay, I'm not going to get support for now. I'm going to fix this myself because I can, right? But eventually when you start fixing your things yourself, then you can kind of prove like, hey, now I'm fixing it at least on a small scale. It's not the perfect system. It has its faults. It's going to fail. I actually need your help to like make this work every time, like consistently. And then they get on board and they're like, oh yeah, okay. Now we knew you're using the data that you said you needed. It's proving some result, right? Like, for example, we had a field like for like subscription end date, right? It would like, I need to know that this person's subscription is ended so that we can send them a promotional email, or that they've renewed so that we don't send them a promotional email. So we fix that on a small scale and be able to say like, okay, now we're saying the right thing to most people like 90% of the time, but there's still 10% of people who are getting the wrong thing. Let's get that down to 1%, right? And then they get on board with it. And then now we're at a spot where I was like, we proved like, okay, working with the lifecycle team actually has some result that's beneficial to the customer, actually reduced effort from their team because they were having to do like random things for me all the time. So now I have a little bit of goodwill so that I can ask for more things in the future to like, so it's a snowball that accumulates so I can do more with them.
Was it the actual, because you had evidence that something works? Or do you think that they also gave you some credibility because you knew what you were talking about from like a technical standpoint? A little bit of both, or?
Yeah, probably like there's a technical like abilities. I would go to them like, oh, okay, I fixed it. This is how I did it. This is the query that you could just drop it into something like whatever tool you're going to use, improve it for your guys' sake, and then like productionalize it. So there's that, like being able to speak the same languages, like definitely speeds things up. It's less of a burden to them. So like trying to like streamline the process for them and make it as easy as possible helps to get things moving. It doesn't work every time, but like it helps.
Yeah, definitely. Walk us through like that process for push notifications at Calm. Like when we first chatted about getting you on the show, you mentioned that it took a whopping 3 years to get push notifications on the roadmap at Calm. And you mentioned 4 years for ML recommendations. What were your initial approaches that didn't work? And how did you kind of like tweak that strategy? Any amusing stories that kind of come to mind about the resistance you encountered along the way?
Yeah. So the push one was an interesting one because we needed a screen on the subscription app where somebody could just go in and turn it on or off inside the app. I think that was like a requirement from Apple that was newer, right? That had rolled out, that they just required it. I got to think about that, like what happened for a second here.
I'm just wondering, because like I've seen this, I've experienced this before too. Like, in what world do people think that push doesn't work, or like is not for like a B2C app?
Yeah.
I'm gonna try not to like name names here, but I started working for this company, and they said like, oh, we don't need like an app. Like it was a consumer company, like we don't need an app, and like because it's so basic, you often don't even know how to respond. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the experience for you, but like in my mind, it's so difficult for me to like grasp how business people can say, no, we're not going to do push. It's not important.
It could be coming from just preconceived prejudices, I think, against certain channels, right? Because before I started getting into email and push, before that, when I was working on the web stuff, I hated email. I thought it was like the scammiest thing, right? Everybody calls email spam, right? And it's like nobody wants to deal with it. But then once I got into it and we started sending a lot, and then you can see the business outcomes like of doing those things. It makes money, it makes engagement, it drives everything. So if somebody like, I think I don't want to put like thoughts into whatever the people who were running the products were before were. It wasn't just, it was something that they just didn't want to do. They probably had something they were just, maybe they use too many like slot machine apps and you get the push notification like every 5 seconds. They don't like that, right? So they're like, oh, we don't want Calm or our app to be that.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's the approach, right? So you have to come at it like at least give us an option to be able to do it. And then eventually we had some new leadership come in because people rolled out, and then it was the easiest thing because the new chief product officer had come from a background where they used push successfully at his company, and it was like I presented him a little thing of like, hey, I need these 3 buttons on this screen. And he said, yeah, okay, yeah, obviously we need that. Like, and then they built it like 6 weeks later. It was not like a large lift, but it's really just, that was kind of the thing where I realized like, okay, now we have to actually understand like who you're talking to in the organization, like the product person or the sales person or the engineer person. As a salesperson, I'm the lifecycle person selling an idea to the product manager or to the engineer that's solving something that's affecting them. Right. Or something that they're like predisposed to want to buy. Right. So push notifications, like they didn't want it. So like, and I was going up against it and like trying to start small and say, with the assumption like, okay, if I send 100,000 pushes, I'm going to get a 10% rate, like re-engagement rate, which was definitely not the case. Right. It's like, I don't know. I forgot the numbers, but maybe 10% is wrong. Like maybe like 100%, right. Something like insane where you can't say no. Like if he's so good that they can't ignore you. Right. It was not good enough for them to not ignore. Like they were just like ignore because it was maybe the audience is too small, the engagement lift was too minor at that level, right? But then once you compound it over the year, over like a course of a year, then then you're seeing real results. But that it's just like it was hard to prove as a one-off, also, right? I think that was the other problem. It's like I think for email and push, it's something you just have to do it and do it and do it, and then eventually it's like it turns into this large thing. Yeah, like SEO too.
When I had to do that at a couple past companies and they didn't have like push set up as a channel either, the approach that we took was like kind of competitive benchmarking. Like look at these 4 competitors that we have. We signed up for all 4 of their apps. All 4 of them are setting push notifications. We are the only one in this bucket of 5 tools doing the same thing that doesn't send push notifications. Like that to me, like even though we were able to show like industry benchmarks and these are projections about engagement rates and this is how it's going to ladder up to other KPIs, like just being able to say like these other 3 or 4 competitors were doing it, like the CPO was just like, shit, we got to do it. Like what were some of the initial conversations that you have that you got pushback on? And like, what did you learn from this? Like if you were to go to another company, or if you were to like turn that off and you had to like make the push for getting it to come back again, like how would you go about this differently?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, maybe a part of the problem or part of the friction was that we're the number one for that during that time. So it's like we're number one. We don't need to do these things that other people are trying to catch up to. I mean, I think if we turned them off, we would see the dip. It'd be like you would see the engagement rates go down, and it would say, hey, we turned this off on this date. It's there. Like, I don't know what that is, like a reverse A/B test almost. It's essentially a A/B test, right? In order to sell it back, or like maybe we're trying to sell it into another organization or something like that. I don't know. It's like, it's table stakes at this point. I think you just have to at least have the option to do it. It's just, I mean, it's built into everything anyway. It's like so easy to
yeah. I mean, I love the fact how I think you took a very data-driven approach. Just showing the data of why push is effective as a channel and driving engagement and business results, and then you have to show that to leadership so that they say, okay, that we have to invest in this. But I think that what's surprising to me, and it sounds like to all 3 of us, is the fact that you had to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, why did you have to? What a waste of time. But anyway, well, what can you do?
Well,
But
I think the hard thing is because push it's not a great sales channel.
Yeah.
Like I don't find that you can send a push and somebody's going to buy something from you. Right. So it's kind of removed from, and this is a problem that we've had for some other things of like, it's hard to prove that the engagement lift eventually turned into the monetary lift. Right. And I don't sit on the data science and stuff like that. So I don't know where all those like the flywheels go, but it's just the fact that it's like, it's like a first or second derivative away from the dollars. That is a little bit harder to prove.
that also seems very, you know, that also seems like a very standard, a default part of B2C mobile app marketing, which is doing things to increase engagement to therefore increase revenue in the future. So I find it even strange too that and maybe I have it wrong. I haven't done like mobile app marketing is not part of my portfolio. But it just seems to me very logical that if you have an app on a very competitive app marketplace, that you would want to do things to increase engagement. But maybe it's not as black and white as that, and like you really need to go through these business discussions and do the evaluation. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been, and again, I'm not the product managers, but like, it's like the engagement, maybe there is, because they look at different parts at different quarters, and maybe like they're looking at onboarding for the first quarter, although, engagement on the first week is definitely, it could be driven by push, but they also don't want to turn people off either.
That's true.
Right. Just by being annoyed. So there's always that balance. I don't know how product managers balance like frequency and stuff, in terms of like turning people off or dissuading them from using the app. Because like you said, you get the push notifications from us. A lot of people don't want to receive a push notification 1 or 2 times a day. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why Apple requires that home
Yeah.
screen to be able to opt in and out of them. I joined a company where they were doing push already, but it was very poorly done. Like you could tell that the person that was asked to do it like was just trying to get this off their plate really quickly, and it was literally the same message every single day, every morning, basically prompting the person to like log back into the app and like do this one action, right? And I built a team of lifecycle managers who were able to break up that onboarding funnel into a couple different stages, and we called it like activation. And there was a huge drop off from the number of people on that first day within the first couple of hours that didn't do X, Y, and Z. And so the push after they opted in for it was 100% dedicated to just doing these 2 checklist items. And eventually we had like a checklist in there after. And so to your point, I think it is like harder to demonstrate that engagement metrics lead to revenue. I think that like a lot of companies have done like the data science work to prove it. And I think that like that's part of the selling story of Lifecycle. Like we improve activation and that helps retention. And both of those are levers to monetization. Like that's the whole kind of growth flywheel there. Like if someone's not active and using the product, they're not going to upgrade and like add more things to their plan. And so I think it plays a big role here. But you kind of talked about like selling this to PMs, like you mentioned PMs a few times in there. I would say a big part of this in bigger companies and like deciding what's going to be on the roadmap or not. For me, sometimes I've had to actually sell some of these projects to engineers and not the PM. So like maybe an engineering leader, right? Like I'm curious if you've like had that at Flipboard or even Calm. Like could you walk us through like typical conversations with engineers when you're trying to like get buy-in for this new like marketing campaign or something that you're kind of missing, and how often does that get you into like build versus buy discussions with engineers when it comes to Martech?
The average salesperson closes like 1% of their deals, right? Or something like that, right? It's a lot of outreach. I would say it was the same for me, where I was like, just like throwing ideas or things that I wanted to achieve, and maybe I got 10% or 1% and then whatever the number is, right? Which is fine, right? Like
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
just you're gonna get
Pretty
rejected and just
standard,
get used
yeah.
to it, right?
Um,
The one thing that we did was the ML, like being able to pull ML recs for filling in the like an email or a push, right? And just say like, okay, let the machine go grab a thing for this person and present it. That one was something that we had done at Flipboard and like pretty successfully. And again, I think it was just getting it in front of a person, like because we again new engine leadership. He came in, and they want to make a splash, right? Because like they want to have a win within their first 100 days as well. Everybody wants to get like I came with them with that idea. Just was like, hey, let's this worked at a different company and we used it, and it's like it reduces a lot of it's something that's evergreen. We use it all constantly, and let's work together on it. I'm kind of getting lost in my thought there, but like it was kind of like right person, right time. We were doing a little bit more ML like in other parts of the app, so they kind of had already like the infrastructure was already in place, and it was going to be like a sprint of one person's time to kind of get it up and running. And yeah, it was just kind of like, how do I sell it? Like, well, something we already have to do, they already done, right? You get to like expand on something that they've already built, right? Because people always love to reuse something that they've already built or repurpose, right? Because you're getting more return on the amount of time that they invested in it. Yeah, and then was kind of like, figure out like, how does what I need expand on something that they've already built? Because then they can iterate on it, and it could be smaller. Because if I just like went in and asked for like an ML thing from out of the blue and they never done it, there's no way, right? Because that's like a multi-year, probably, I don't know, like a years long project that's coming out of one group that it doesn't serve like the whole company, right? Like it doesn't serve a bunch of other. I think they're just looking for
the
that.
the timing thing is so critical, and you're so right. Because if you introduce, and I've done this both ways, like I've introduced a new idea when the rallying cry for the company was to simplify, like simplify, and then you have me presenting to leaders saying, hey, let's start a hackathon. And it just fell so flat because it's just like it's not the right time. And one of the things that I learned, which is what you said resonates with me, is when there is a rallying cry across the company or like a really big theme, like AI is a really big one. If you come in with an idea and tie it with the theme or whatever, like sort of big agenda is happening right now, you're much more likely to get buy-in.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I can see why, if ML is a big thing for engineering, they want to introduce machine learning across everything. You can come in and say like, hey, here's this marketing initiative that requires machine learning. Let's do it. And
Exactly.
And naturally everybody's going to be on board. Whereas if you're like going against the grain, which kind of sucks to say, but if you're going against the grain, it's much more difficult, especially as the company is like gets bigger and bigger. It's already hard to get people rowing in the same direction. So if you position your idea as something that's going to help us go in the same direction faster, it's much more likely to get adopted. So yeah, kudos to you. That's exactly how I would have approached it too.
Yeah, but it's kind of like lying in wait, right? You got to be that tiger in the bushes and just like, okay,
Yes.
I'm on the lookout. Something's going to happen. They're going to do something. Let's attack it when the time is right, which I think I've been doing kind of wrong. Or like for the push notification stuff, it was like wrong people, wrong time, right? They didn't want it. So you're not going to win, right? But eventually the tide turned.
Yeah, I feel like it depends also on like how the engineering and the data team in this case is set up from like a cycle perspective. Like I've worked at companies where they're like boxed in and there's maybe a PM that's kind of responsible for figuring out what the engineers are going to work on in this like cycle or whatever. And they've already built a roadmap like 2 years ago and they're still following that. And you're the marketer coming up with like an idea and they're just like, dude, get out of here. Like we've got 2 years worth of tickets to go through. Like good luck getting in here. But I've
Yeah.
worked at companies where there's like a shorter cycle and there's like a planning cycle to this. And the roadmap is a bit more in flux and it's dynamic. And I would have a counterpart on the data and the engineering team. And we would have quarterly sessions where those people would meet with different stakeholders in the company. I was one of their stakeholders on the Martech team. And they would look at requests that I would have. So they'd look at like projects that are on my wish list, and then we prioritize them. I like explain the use case, the potential impact. They put this in like a rice model, whatever they used, and then they go off and in a week or two they tell me like, we're not going to do all of these except for that one, or like this one we're maybe going to do, or we're going to push everything back. But at least like I felt like I got a say in trying to, and it wasn't like I was less of a tiger in the bush waiting for the right time to push this. And it was more of like, all right, I have this quarterly opportunity to make a push and make a pitch for like this one idea or this other idea. And maybe I come to that pitch with support from this other senior leader who also wants this, who is sharing that same KPI as me. So I feel like it depends a bit on the maturity and the sophistication of the data and the engineering like cycle process.
Yeah, I that definitely, that sounds, I agree with that works. Like, but you're still like, you would have had your laundry list of things,
Yeah.
right? And it kind of lined up. So I think we're talking about the same thing, whereas
Okay.
like you had written it out. It's not like you wrote like an entirely new set of things after they rejected the other 10, right? Or the other 9, right? You kept it and you waited and it was there, right? Like, I think that's just important. Like, have the ideas, have them written down, and be prepared to like to discuss them and back it up with something that like is going to get pitted against, probably 50 other things in that quarter.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Knack. I have the amazing pleasure of chatting with some of the greatest minds in marketing operations, but you'd be shocked at how many of them have the same issues when it comes to their campaign creation process. They're dealing with things like scaling, personalization, keeping assets on brand, render testing emails, working in rigid templates, and worst of all, having to hand code emails. But many of the leaders in the space are using Knack to eliminate these headaches. Knack is a no-code email and landing page creation platform that covers initial campaign requests right until the sync to your marketing automation platform. Knack improves the whole campaign creation process by bringing the building, optimization, testing, collaboration, and also translation functions all in a single spot. So you don't have to jump around and coordinate feedback between a bunch of different people or wait on developers for very simple edits. Because at the end of the day, marketing ops folks want to focus on process and efficiency. Marketers want to focus on creativity, and Knack makes sure you get both and then some. Check them out at knack.com. That's KNAK, and tell them we sent you.
Why don't we talk about like team structure a little bit? Like, what's the division of skills? Like, what kind of skills that you think that you need on the team to succeed in doing, messaging at this scale? Gosh, I saw it. It's like in the hundreds of millions, right? In terms of like email and push. So that's so crazy. So what? How did the evolution of your team go? Did it start with just you, and then you hired some more people? How did you choose around who you would bring onto the team, and what does that look like?
Yes. So before, we had a head of lifecycle that started before me, and she was like a big time like email advocate, and she brought me in because she has done lifecycle a few times and had the problems of can't get engineering resources, can't get like X, Y, and Z to like patch things up. So she was very, very specific in trying to find an operational person that could patch all the holes, like a duct tape and bandages guy. Like that's basically where I thrive. That's like kind of like what I love to do. So then it was me and her, and then we brought on an HTML, like a designer guy. I think as like a full timer. He was as a contractor before. So we had 3 people for probably 2 or 3 years, and we were jamming out.
And you're
Uh,
using homegrown tools or like
we
internal?
we have a platform. We use a email ESP or whatever,
Okay,
like a customer IO or one of those.
gotcha.
And we were kind of building stuff, one-off campaigns constantly. And eventually, when you get to like a thing where like every email that we send a weekly email on Sundays, and it's like this digest of, come, here's what you want to come in and see. It would take like 6 or 8 hours per week to get this thing together. So, because we had to like pull in content from other people, figure out what's the feature. So we had to like look at, where's all the friction coming from and productionalize it. So like he developed my design teammate, he designs and codes. So he developed like a Lego pieces, kind of like a design system where we pre-built all the HTML, and then I templated it out. And now we're producing emails in, probably an hour or something like that, maybe half an hour, depending on whatever, right? And we had to line up like the content people into like the cadence of like, okay, you got to get us this information, or even just batch it up like a month in advance. So like this kind of stuff, it took a long time to get to that spot. But we're there finally. And then like over the time, we added a couple more lifecycle people, a couple more, some people come and they go. But for the bedrock is like a lifecycle person, and then like the designer developer, and then I'm doing the tooling to kind of like ease the tension between, or like, just give him the capacity to like handle three or four marketers to like throwing stuff at him all the time. And if you get to if you engineer a thing properly, we could probably we've probably scaled our different types of campaigns that we can do, probably 2x last year,
Very
like
cool.
year over year.
Are you like a bit like a service org also? Like, are you fielding requests for campaigns from a bunch of other teams on top of like the things that you guys have on your roadmap also?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're like kind of a service org, but we try to not be as much as possible. So there's often pushback from the team, but I leave that to the lifecycle managers. They're good at that. I'm not. I'm the type of person who just like, all right, fine, I'll just do it.
I'll figure it out.
I know it.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point, like somebody has to do those last second asks. It's whatever. It's just make it as painless as possible.
Yeah. It's cool that like you were brought in to kind of do some of the patchwork and not have to have the friction with using internal resources that are external to the lifecycle team. Like I like the angle that you were hired into. We talk a lot about this on the show, this idea that like how do we get engineers excited about marketing is oftentimes easier said than done. But and we've chatted with another one this year also, but you're also in the camp of essentially a web developer who went into the email route. And you touched on this a little bit, but like every engineering team that I've worked with, and a lot of those engineers, like initially they saw Martech and marketing technology as just like sending emails, sales en masse, like a lot of like spam, like one bad apple creates a lot of that negative perception about marketing. I'm curious to ask you if you could share like a specific project or something that happened where you're able to transform that perception for others, or when that happened for you, when you made that transition, like how do you reframe lifecycle marketing to get developers excited about some of the technical challenges that lead to growth, but that are technically marketing and not product?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's technically marketing, but I view like the emails and the push as a product or platform in itself.
Okay.
Right? We send as much, we probably drive as much traffic as the website does. Probably more actually, because it's 100 million people or wherever. Like even Flipboard, 300 billion messages. Right? There's like that's a product. That's not just marketing, right? You got to treat it with some respect because it's driving a lot of things. And it takes like, in order to get it to kind of like an evergreen state where we were just, sending like these digest emails, that's also a product. It's a web page, right? Like every email is a collection of data coming out of our back end that has to be formatted and turned into something, right? So it's not just it is like it is engineering in a lot of
Mm.
regards. But like, what was I trying to say there? It's that I think that was the part where I was working on web pages and you had to wait for people to come and visit them,
Mm.
and they don't always come, right? Like even if like you could have an SEO or something, like even if you're driving whatever, a million visits a day, if your web page is in the reg gate, people aren't going to see it, right? Like you got to get that thing in front of their eyes, right?
Mm.
So like from an email, we could prove out some things too. Like you can use probably faster to produce like that, like for example, the ML thing, like, hey, is it picking the right thing for this person? Well, you blast an email into their face or, like into their screen, or a push notification that's like presenting the piece of content like a news article. And if they open it, that's a way faster signal than like waiting for them to open the app and hoping that they'll see it. Right? It's just like you can prove things faster. And I think that's where like the where I made the transition is because I
Mm.
like it's like, hey, I can get this thing in front of this person. And if I made a mistake, it was an email, so that like most people, like it disappears. Is like it's kind of like it'll just get buried by 1,000 other things by tomorrow. So I can try again. Right, you get a new chance like every couple of days
Mm.
probably to like kind of make an impression, like or just try to make your take your shot at whatever you're trying to experiment on. It's just faster. It's a very fast cycle.
That is a cool way to think about it. Like email and push, even though they are technically like channels leading people to the product, they could be treated as a product in and of itself. And I feel like that's like some of the pushback you get from engineers. It's like, I don't get excited about getting up every day and like logging into an email tool and like blasting emails to a bunch of people. Like, I'd rather work on this feature that's going to be seen by like 100 million people in the app itself.
Sure.
But to your point, it's like, yeah, but those people just don't like all wake up one day and want to log into the app. That's where push comes in, and they're almost like a product themselves because they are standalone. Like that push notification in the phone, like there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do to trigger that and get people to kind of log in and want to do something, let alone email, like you said. Like an email is essentially a like static version of a web page, and sometimes you can make it dynamic also. But yeah,
Yeah.
I really like your perspective there.
But it does. I mean, at some point, like it has like once you have that, we have those evergreen like weekly ones. They are a product that people miss. They
Mhm.
notice when you didn't send it to them on Sunday at 5
Mm.
p.m. We'll get complaints. They're like, hey, I didn't get my email on, like where is it? Send me another one. Like, make sure you get it to me. Right.
Mhm.
So it's like that. That's a. I don't think that everybody has that problem. Like,
Yeah.
but like, it's a good problem. It makes me feel good because it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, people are noticing that they didn't see it. Like, it's also kind of yeah. It's just it's a nice feeling to be like
Yeah.
they missed it.
It's a cool spot to be in. I think like
Yeah.
most people that send emails, the purpose is to drive people to a landing page or their website or log into the product. But it's like what you just said is if your email is good enough, it can be a standalone product like
Sure.
those like Sunday digest emails. And I'm a Calm user, but I was also a huge Flipboard fan back in the day. I haven't used it in a while, but I loved it. And like I instead of going on Google or like 7 different news sites, I would just open my Flipboard app and instead of opening the app all the time, I would just like start reading the digest that I got
Yeah.
from the emails themselves. So like it's almost like email was the Flipboard product because I would digest the stories through my inbox as opposed to always logging in there. So I think that's like a bit of a privilege thing though, because like Daryl and I, we both like spend a lot of time in the B2B world. And
Hmm.
B2B, like we don't have always apps for like the end users to use, and email is usually just a tool to, get people at the next stage of their sales journey or like go on a website and fill out a form. I think in the B2C world, there's just a lot more fun and flexibility with email for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Like I've been trying to replicate the experience for another and it doesn't not everything lends it to itself to
Yeah.
like an automated, like a weekly thing. It's hard.
So I have kind of like this is a kind of a random question, but I feel like you have a really cool job, and it's like doing marketing operations for B2B, for B2C at like a really big scale, and just a cool company. Like, for those people that like want to follow in your footsteps and kind of want a role like yours, like, should you be super technical? Do you consider yourself very technical, above average? Like, how does what skills do you think you need? What skills have you found super important to be successful, like, at your job?
I am, yeah, I would say I'm definitely super technical. I, I think it's kind of like what Phil was alluding to is like, how does an engineer get interested in Martech from that lens, right? Um, I like it because we rely on these platforms that have to do all of the pager duties, answering all the fires, right? I'm not responsible for the 99% uptime of the email service. Somebody else is, and we're paying them a lot of money to be the person, right? So I get to do all the fun stuff, right? I'm making these emails, I'm doing the experiments, all of the, analytics, blah 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 blah. Like all ends up in some other platform where we're looking at the results and stuff like that. So I've managed to strip away all of like that's kind of like the drudgery of unit
Mm.
tests, scaling, penetration testing, whatever, like, uh, it's very fast paced. Um, it's very creative, and it's, for us, it has a direct impact on the bottom line immediately. Like you send an email and like thousands of dollars come back. It's like, it's fun to see.
You mentioned the ML recommendations project a few times in our chat already, and I want to dig into that. Like, one of the things I enjoy the most about working at bigger companies, I've only had a few stints, but this idea of like more resources, specifically data engineering, data science, and even though you're not always getting your stuff on the roadmap, like it is cool to have access to that. And your typical startup, like you're lucky if there is one data engineer on the team, let alone like finding people to help you build like custom ML models to do the type of stuff that you were kind of describing there. But still, though, for many folks at those big companies, and I'm curious to hear if that's the case for you at Como. So, like those ML resources are not always shared and not always
Mm.
dedicated to marketing or life cycle. And sometimes you just have to like figure out a way to do it without them. What are your thoughts on this? And like, how do you kind of go to market when you don't always have access to those resources?
Well, I think the effectiveness of the ML itself from the regard of picking the recommendation wasn't like the mind blowing result that you
Mm.
might hope, right? In terms of like the amount, like the cost per user to generate those recs, and then the return of the engagement that we got probably didn't pan out. It was like um, it was an interesting, like a nice technical achievement that we were able to pull off, but like I was talking about before, like in turning of getting that engagement and then turning into dollars down the line, I don't think it paid off. So we've kind of maybe, moved away from that a little bit, but we can still reasonably like personalize according to at least some signal that we're getting from, your prior usage, which is what the ML was looking at anyway, right? So it was basically like, hey, Daryl happens to like soundscapes, and he uses them a lot, and Phil likes sleep stories, so he uses them a lot. So like, you kind of like, we could approximate it, and it's not going to be like the ultimate thing, but we can say like, well, this person uses soundscapes more than the other things, we'll send them like the same thing of what they already used. It's just cheaper and faster that
Mhm.
way. So there's some like, yeah, there was like some cost benefit like we had to like figure out in terms of, whether it worked aside from the technical achievement. But then in terms of getting the resourcing, that one was like they had already built it, right? So like I was just trying to get like into it. I don't know that there was any special magic that like we pulled off. Like if you want, at the end of the day, it's ML is a personalization, at least from this regard. So it's just like if you can personalize it at a broad level, that's better than nothing. And then like the more you can prove that the personalization is impacting things, then the more likelihood that somebody's going to start paying attention to what you're working on, I think.
Very cool. So the takeaway is almost like if you don't have access to like a fancy propensity model to tell you the next best action that a user should be taking, sometimes there's a lot of value in just looking at that first party data in your product analytics tool that is helping you figure out the direction of potentially the next best action for some of these things by just looking at like what Daryl has interacted with recently or stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just showing them something that they've already seen before seems to help, like seems to work.
Hmm. There, there's this like I don't want to say it's a rumor, but it's like a trend at a lot of forward-thinking companies, and that is that marketers are no longer selecting audiences for their offers. So meaning that, hey, I'm a marketer, I'm going to come up with an offer or message. The system and the data and the algorithms will choose my audience for me. And some forward-thinking companies are like moving toward that, where historically marketers are like, oh, I want to send to these people, but now, especially at more technical companies, we're taking that out of their hands. Does that resonate with you at all? Do you feel like that's a good direction, or do you still feel like marketers should pick their audiences?
I did talk to a vendor about that. It was interesting. It was like definitely a mind shift that maybe we're not, at least I'm not ready for. Like I couldn't understand. Like I got the idea, but I think there's some. It's nice to be able to know why something is like working for those people, and it's like more explainable to my like leadership, for example, right? I think because we had evaluated something like that, and it wasn't like we couldn't develop a story except for to say, well, the ML picked something and it worked. Like you don't always know, like you don't, not even always, like we never, it's like a black box. It's hard to like when you're just sending something and it seems to be working, but it might be working for the wrong reasons, right? Like I think I had mentioned in our little pre-interview or something like I accidentally sent 19 million emails that were basically blank, and we got a massive open rate, right? So if the ML like or the AI is gonna be like, oh, we should send more blank emails, I don't think that's the answer, right? Like
That's genius.
so you have to
Oh
know like
man,
there's something there to like to have like a
oh that's so good.
yeah, like it could be optimizing for the wrong things, and if you're not looking at it and you don't know what's going on and you just assume that it's doing the right thing, then you might end up screwed. Like that's I think there's some value in like knowing who you're trying to talk to, because that was another thing was like kind of like we were talking about the podcast I listened to. Like I listened to a lot of magnetic marketing and just like marketing journals. Like the machine might know what they want, but I think there's like it's like you just gotta know, like something has to know what the user wants, and if you don't know, like if it's a black box and you don't know what the users are responding to, like on your own, like how are you gonna write anything for them, like or to like to build this copy or to like, get to like have make this connection with the end, like the buyer or the end user or whatever, right? Like I don't know that we can trust those like the automatic stuff to like be saying the right thing that's like brand safe and like or even brand aligned, right? To kind of like to always do the right thing, or at least not where we're at right now.
No, that's such a real example. I never thought about it that way, but your example of 19 million blank emails and AI's optimizing now for blank emails. I think it just really just goes to show that, yeah, there's always going to be a place for the humans of Martech. Gotcha. There's always going to be a place for the humans of Martech. One other thing too, I will say is like, maybe you can tell Phil, because Phil is of the belief that engineers and data people, don't really like to be in marketing. They think it's like a tour of duty. So like, you're never really going to get great technical people working in marketing. So can you tell Jeff, that he's wrong and that you really like being in marketing?
Well, absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I don't want
absolutely
to put
enjoy
words
it.
in your mouth, but if that's how you feel, tell us.
Yeah, absolutely enjoy it. I think I don't know. Like some people, depends, right? Some people like doing like certain types of things. But if you're like an engineer who likes speed, like of execution, a high iteration, impact to the bottom line, or measurable like impacts, then like don't like, you're not getting paid just to change the color of a button and wait like 6 weeks for it to go stat sig that like red was better than blue. Then I think you might be interested in marketing, right? Like that's the pitch. More engineers in marketing. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I like it. What do you think is the most common lie that marketing teams tell themselves about why engineers won't support their initiatives? Like, how can marketing teams better understand and respect engineering constraints and priorities when it comes to like pitching ideas to engineers?
Okay, so the biggest lie I have to say is like that they don't have time. Engineers have some time, right? They're kind of I'm not saying maybe not at a Meta or something like that, but like at startups, I had some time. I made time. Like we're kind of. I think that's the beauty of like we're creative people, right? Like so we have ideas. We try to people build their own apps like at home and stuff like that. So like if you can build something internally, that's fun too. Yeah, so that's probably the lie in terms of like how do you get them to kind of like come over to the other side. I just thought like what was I like come up with, if you have something, try to build it a little bit, or or start like prototyping it a little bit yourself, or like develop like a mock-up or something, at least so that you can communicate it, because they might get interested in your project. They might like feel like, oh, actually I am already working on something that's very similar to that, and I could just throw in 5 extra lines of code and you'll be supported. You don't know, like sometimes like you'd be surprised that in some cases something that you think is really huge might only take 10 minutes to complete. And something that you think is really tiny might take 10 months, right? Like, so you just have to like have it there and be available, like, to discuss it, right? A little bit.
Yep. No, I totally believe that. And actually my brother is a product manager, and even they have to sell to engineers. And he tells me that the way he does it is he literally puts on, like, he built an entire PowerPoint show about like why this feature is going to be exciting, and like turns it into like this is the future, guys. This is the future, and you're going to help us get there, and you have to do it. You know what I mean? Like most of work and life is just sales and influence. So
Sure.
anyway, we're running out of time. So I wanted to talk to you, Jeff. You're a technical leader, email pro, but you're also a dad, like me, golfer, home chef, light programmer. One question we ask everyone on the show is, how do you remain happy and successful in your career? How do you find balance between all the things you're working on while still staying happy?
So, like I mentioned before, it was like I'm a tinkerer. I like to do things. I like to build things. And like there's this term of Ikigai. I was like, find out something that you're passionate about, and then you'll also get paid for. I think this combination of marketing and engineering, of like the speed, that's kind of it. I like doing this. So it's like the balance is there. I'm not saying like, and I tend to work on the things that interest me, or that, well, I'll get into a flow state and I'll just like realize like, oh, it's like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Like, well, what happened to today? Those are the things I like to do. It's not good career advice, right? I'm not saying like, if you're trying to be a VP or a director or something, X, Y, or Z, chasing Ikigai stuff isn't going to get you there. Maybe, probably not. But like, at that point, it's just like, I enjoy working. I do this once the kids go to bed. I might continue to do more stuff, like occasionally, just for myself, like just because it's entertaining, and it's just like I try to align my career with my interests or my like things that I enjoy doing, and here I am.
Super cool answer, Jeff. Really appreciate your time sharing those war stories behind two of those awesome, really cool companies. Clearly, they're lucky to have you. I think any Lifecycle team out there needs a Jeff on their team, and yeah, really appreciate you sharing those stories with us, man. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jeff.